What are the possible consequences of Manny Diaz accepting the Duke head coaching job? We'll start with this. Manny Diaz could take coaches with him. And I will go on the record right now that this is a significant, strong possibility. If Manny Diaz offers a full play caller, offensive coordinator spot to either one of Ty Howle or Ja'Juan Cider, they will most likely accept. They have had their opportunity as co-offensive coordinators at Penn State, and I'm not saying they were shunned. I'm not saying they were left behind when Penn State went outside to hire Andy Kotelnicki. Kotelnicki, at this point in time, is the better offensive coordinator candidate than either of those two because of the experience. He's been an offensive coordinator. He's been a play caller now for over a decade, right? And for the first time, you're calling plays at the Big Ten for just a couple of games, and you call them against the likes of Rutgers and Michigan State. That's enough to put you in the conversation, and you've been around Penn State staff for a long time, but it's not enough to land you the Big Ten Penn State offensive coordinator full-time play calling duties. So if Manny Diaz, he's another guy that is very good at building strong relationships. That's why he was able to come to Penn State and have the impact that he had. But now if and when he goes to Duke, right? It's all but confirmed here. He's going to have an open offensive coordinator spot. Maybe he has some other relationships with past coaching stops that he'll be able to bring in. But I got to think that Ja'Juan Seider and Ty Howle are on his short list to be the play caller, to be the full offensive coordinator at Duke. And Cider and Ty Howle would not be wrong for accepting that spot. No, they wouldn't go together. This wouldn't be a package deal. I don't think that's going to happen. If I think anybody is going to be hired, it's going to be Ja'Juan Seider. I would think Ja'Juan Seider is the first candidate that Manny Diaz is going to look at for that Duke offensive coordinator spot. Ja'Juan Seider is a former quarterback. He's an excellent recruiter, right? If you really want to kill two birds with one stone in this case, you knock out your recruiting goals and your offensive coordinator goals in one hire, and that's what Ja'Juan Seider is. Ja'Juan Seider doesn't have any more upward mobility at Penn State. That is a huge consequence. My biggest concern is that Ja'Juan Seider does in fact leave to take a potential Duke offensive coordinator spot. I will go on the record, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but my prediction is that Ja'Juan Seider is the offensive coordinator at Duke and follows Manny Diaz. Ty Howle could be another option if somehow Penn State is able to convince Ja'Juan Seider that if you bide your time, if you wait here, Andy Kotelnicki takes a head coaching job or goes to the NFL or something like that, you'd be the next guy since you've called plays, since you're the co-offensive coordinator. But I just don't see any more upward mobility in the near future for Ja'Juan Seider. He's kind of maxed everything out. He can only add so many titles. He can only prove how good of a recruiter he is for so long. Eventually, he's got to move up as well. It's the same thing with Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz was never going to be the defensive coordinator forever. Ja'Juan Seider is not going to be the running backs coach forever. At some point, he's going to want to move up. He's not going to settle. Could Manny Diaz take players with him? It's a possibility. Remember this, he's the linebackers coach as well. No, I'm not implying that Kobe King, Abdul Carter, all these guys are going to jump into the transfer portal. That's not what I'm implying at all. But I think about players that he has recruited in the past. Tony Rojas. I'm not trying to you have to be aware of the situation. Guys who committed to Penn State because of who they were going to be working with, in Manny Diaz at the given time. Don't tell him Manny Diaz isn't going to say, all right, well, I'm taking the Duke head coaching job and now I'm going to leave the roster alone. Maybe there's a mutual respect between him and James Franklin, but you can't tell me that there's not going to be conversations had about what opportunities are available. Kavon Keys, Tony Rojas, some of those younger linebacker prospects that were recruited and committed to with Manny Diaz. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Here are the players' takes on it, just to give some perspective. No indication that they're leaving, but the players, what I'm getting at is the players clearly liked Manny Diaz. They did. Denai Dennis Sutton posted on X that this essentially was expected. He said, quote, no surprises. Jalen Reed just posted a bunch of nervous grin emojis. Those aren't any indicators that these guys are disgruntled. They're going to enter the transfer portal, but it is upsetting because Penn State knows how competitive it could have been going into 2024, and Manny Diaz is leaving. I am all for coaches doing what's best for them. Same thing with players. If you think the best option's going to the NFL, if you think the best option is going to another school and getting a fresh start, by all means do it. But you can't argue that the players did not like Manny Diaz and aren't hurt by this. It's not coming. I don't think it's coming as a surprise, but it's, coach, if you could have stuck around for one more season, we could have built something great here. It's a shame that you're taking this other opportunity now. The players did not want him to go, obviously. Remember, he coaches the linebackers too, so just be aware of that in the short term. But those players that aren't necessarily playing as much at Penn State right now, and we've heard so much positive conversation about a Kavon Keys. Kavon Keys is not from Pennsylvania. I think he's from Virginia and would move closer to. He was being recruited by North Carolina. Penn State had to out recruit North Carolina. Okay, so if that was one of his top choices, Kavon Keys is already comfortable with the North Carolina area where Duke is. Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? The timing of all of this, the timing of this move from defensive coordinator Manny Diaz, it hurts because Penn State, by firing Mike Yurcich in the middle of the season, they were able to begin the due diligence of going through and assessing ideal offensive coordinators. Andy Kotelnicki happens because you were out in front and able to go past other schools that were vying for his services, or Kansas that was trying to retain him. Manny Diaz, albeit it is only 2 weeks later since Kotelnicki happens, but Mike Yurcich was fired in the middle of the season. That was almost a month ago, and look how quickly Penn State turned around. But look how many moves have been made that maybe Penn State is thinking about, well, if Manny Diaz takes the head coaching job a little sooner, what happens? And I'm not saying you push him out the door to say, all right, we need our next guy. We need our next guy. You fight for the guy to try to retain him. That's what Kansas did. But this is where it's going to lead to my next prediction of who Penn State will make as a defensive coordinator, as we'll discuss that in the third segment. But D'Anton Lynn, former Penn State defensive back, 2008 to 2012. Lynn was the architect of a top 5 UCLA defense. Top 10 at a very minimum. The analytics say so. They had the number 2 rush defense in the entire country, which would be great for the Big Ten. And USC picks him up. USC is able to hire Lynn. Imagine if Penn State is able to have those conversations when Manny Diaz is not in the fold anymore, right? You can't go and scout defensive coordinators when you currently have one employed. D'Anton Lynn would have been my top choice, would have been a home run hire to go along with Andy Kotelnicki. Lynn, the architect of that UCLA defense, a Chip Kelly defense, right? And Lynn made them look really good. That's an offensive-minded guy. And Lynn took them top 10 at a minimum. The analytics had them as top 5. UCLA in the Pac-12 too, right? The Pac-12 is full of offensive juggernauts, and UCLA put together that kind of defense. And now USC gets them, and great. USC's coming to the Big Ten. Another one, Elijah Robinson. Elijah Robinson, interim head coach at Texas A&M, now just accepted the defensive coordinator job at Syracuse. This would have been another home run hire because he's an excellent recruiter. I think he recruits better than Manny Diaz, former grad assistant for Penn State. Both of those guys made a lot of sense. Those are your 1A and 1B. You could have a case for either of them, and they've already been picked up. They already have new jobs. And what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to convince D'Anton Lynn to leave USC to come to Penn State when he's already signed on as the defensive coordinator, already had his introductory press conference. Same thing with Elijah Robinson. You had your experience as the Texas A&M head coach, interim head coach, when Jimbo Fisher was fired, and Fran Brown offers you the job. Fran Brown works quickly. I've had 2 episodes now devoted to talking about the impact that Fran Brown will have on Penn State, and not once but twice he's already undercut Penn State here by taking away Ahmad from Penn State as a recruiting coordinator and or recruiting analyst and making him the recruiting coordinator at Syracuse. And now this is a bit of a chess move, right? Hiring Elijah Robinson in this case. No, I don't think Fran Brown makes that hire at Syracuse to say, well, I don't want Penn State to have him, so I'm going to have him. But look how quickly Fran Brown has already had an impact on what Penn State wants to do. And everyone told me I was crazy for thinking that wasn't a good hire, or for thinking that was a bad hire or something like that, along the lines of that I was overrating the hire. Fran Brown is a problem, not only in recruiting, but look at the decisions he's made by taking Ahmad away from the recruiting staff and now Elijah Robinson off your defensive coordinator board.